Hello, and welcome to our presentation for social work practice with individuals with substance use disorders and their families. Our presentation is on gambling disorder, and our case study for this presentation is Tasha Martin. Before I begin, I would like to take a moment to talk about the term gambling because it's important that we have a working knowledge of what gambling is prior to us moving forward. Gambling is whenever a person takes the chance of losing money or personal items, or when winning or losing something is decided mostly by chance. Gambling is frequently associated with casinos or racetracks, but there's also additional ways you can gamble, such as slot machines, bingo, scratch-offs, or internet gambling, or pool or golf. Some people choose to gamble for many different reasons. Some choose to gamble for socialization or fun, and others choose to gamble for relaxation or an escape. It's important to note that not all gambling is harmful. Over the course of this presentation, we will review more information about gambling disorder using the case study of Tasha Martin. Tasha Martin is a 49-year-old female African-American woman who identifies as lesbian. She grew up Catholic. She was married previously for over 15 years. Her and her ex-wife had a daughter. Her daughter is 17 years old and also identifies as lesbian, and she's currently in a relationship with another female. Tasha has her bachelor's of science in nursing. She's considered upper middle class, and she's a psychiatric nurse at a teaching hospital in a major city. She also has a history of toxic relationships, which we'll get into in a second. Tasha has a history of depression that dates back to her late teens. She has never needed to have any medication for her depression, but has tried to go to therapy previously. Tasha has an autoimmune disease. She is currently on medication for her autoimmune disease. She has continued to keep up with her medicated maintenance, and she has had no issues with her autoimmune disease in the last couple years. She's been on medication for at least the last 8 years. As far as legal concerns are concerned, she does have conflict with her most recent ex. Her ex-girlfriend did not want to end the relationship and has been threatening to get a PFA out on her. Her ex-girlfriend has also threatened to expose Tasha's edible activity. Tasha has been using edibles frequently recently, and having THC in her system while being a psychiatric nurse is a pretty big problem. So should the hospital find out, she's at risk for having her license either lost or suspended. The girlfriend is also threatening to expose her for using her FLMA leave for non-medical related leave and trips. She also is trying to expose her of her gambling habit with the hopes that she can pressure Tasha into returning into an intimate relationship with her. But Tasha so far is not having it. She identifies this relationship as being toxic, and she's doing her best to stay away. Tasha presented with the following problem. She stated, "I turned to gambling after a series of failed toxic relationships. I started to gamble to relax and escape. I'm spending more than I am bringing in and tapping into my retirement, and I can't replace it. I am not able to stop. I feel out of control. I recently started to use edibles in addition to gambling." So let's dig into Tasha's presenting problem a little bit more. Tasha started gambling 15 years ago. She started to gamble socially with her ex-wife. It was just something that they did fun together. They would go on lavish vacations, get the best suite in different locations across the country, and they would spend a good amount of money. However, nothing too crazy, nothing unmanageable. They would go, they would have a good time, and it was just something that they'd like to do together. As the relationship became more toxic, Tasha started to take trips on her own and to spend larger amounts of money. And after they divorced, she continued, and instead of spending money that she was able to use and that was considered play money, she started to dip into higher amounts of money until she was spending tens of thousands of dollars at a time. Tasha is considered a high roller. She's known at very many high class gambling locations. She has her name on many different lists in order to try to stop gambling, but she's also managed to figure out how to get her name off the list in order to continue her habit. She did begin stealing from family. Her mother was the first one. She used her credit card to gamble, and her mother caught her, but she was able to quickly provide the money to pay the debt off, and nothing was really said about it. She also stole from her daughter's college fund twice. The first time her daughter didn't know about it because she was able to put the money back before anybody realized, and her daughter wasn't on the account. After she took, though, from her daughter's account, she put her daughter on the account so that her daughter could monitor the account with the hopes that she would never steal from that again. However, that did not stop her, and her daughter caught her. Her daughter was very upset, and there was definitely some trust issues that developed after her daughter found out that she stole from that account. Tasha is also taking from her retirement. She is taking and borrowing as much as she can, and at this point she's at a point where she can't continue to pay back her daughter's college fund and her retirement and maintain the means that she has been living under for the past couple years. She is starting to really feel the stress of all the debt, and she is taking up extra jobs to pay for her gambling debt. However, she's at a point where she can't work any more than she possibly is at this point, and she's still feeling a lot of stress with what she has to pay. She was introduced to gambling at a young age. She used to place bets for her grandma. It wasn't anything abnormal or seen as taboo. It was just something that she did for her grandma, and it was just something that was acceptable. She does have a positive relationship with her mother, her brother, her sister, and a close cousin. However, she is estranged from her biological father. She did have a father figure growing up. He was killed in an accident in her mid-teens. She does have a former fiance who was murdered. They were engaged in her early 20s. And she has a history of toxic relationships and codependency. So it's important to note that her most recent ex is not her only toxic relationship. Her marriage became very toxic and verbally abusive. She also has a tendency to keep exes in her life, and she will allow them to continue doing things that would be considered inappropriate once a relationship has ended, such as her ex-wife. She allows to cook for her on a weekly basis and help her with her laundry. She also has an ex-girlfriend that does her taxes and that she meets with frequently. So she's very codependent on her exes, and it's definitely something that has played a part in her trauma. Diagnoses. So Tasha meets the criteria for moderate gambling disorder. In order to meet moderate gambling disorder, you have to have at least 6 to 7 criteria met. Tasha has at least 6 criteria that she meets of the criteria that is needed for this disorder. Her condition would be considered persistent, as she has had continuous symptoms that meets this diagnosis criteria for multiple years. So it's important to note the difference between gambling as a problem and gambling as a low-risk gambling. So gambling is when you risk something of value when the outcome is uncertain. So gambling is not inherently evil or harmful, and many people find it exciting or a fun way to socialize or relax. So low-risk gambling means that you have control and you can continue to make rational, fun decisions. If you are doing low risk gambling, you would be able to limit how much money you spend. You would be able to accept your losses, enjoy the winning, but know it happened by chance. You wouldn't gamble in excessive amounts that would cause you to need to borrow money. You wouldn't try to pay debts with the money that you're winning. You also wouldn't gamble when you are impaired or using other drugs. You wouldn't gamble to escape from your problems or your feelings, and you wouldn't allow gambling to hurt your job, your family, or your health. So the opposite would be true for problem gambling. So with problem gambling, you would make less rational decisions. You would not be able to think rationally, and gambling would be more compulsive. You might lie about your gambling or keep it a secret. You might lose track of the time that you are playing. You might feel depressed after playing. You might try to chase your losses, meaning try to win back your money. Gambling might become one of the most important things of your life, and you would definitely allow gambling to affect your family, your relationship, your emotional, and your physical health. So for some people, gambling can become a serious problem, and that will affect all aspects of their lives. Gambling has become more accessible to a large number of people, which means that there is a greater number than ever before of people who are experiencing problem gambling. People who experience problem gambling can be found in all age groups, income groups, cultures, and jobs. And some people develop gambling for different reasons. So you might end up falling into having a gambling problem because you're trying to win back money that you lost, or because you like the action and the scene of the gambling, while other people may have life stressors that cause them to gamble, and that gambling is a way of relief or an escape from their problems. But gambling isn't just about losing the money. Gambling affects a person's whole life. About 1% of adult Americans gamble, and are problem gamblers, and about 6 to 9% of young people and young adults are gamblers. There's higher rates there because of the new technology and the internet gambling and how accessible it is becoming. There is studies that suggest that higher rates of problem gambling can be seen in ethnic and racial minorities. However, there's not longitudinal data that can support that. They suggest this just because of some cultural beliefs, and the fact that minority groups tend to play more card games or dominoes and stuff as a cultural event, and games with family and stuff like that. As far as impact, the impact of gambling impacts all aspects of life. So financial, emotional, physical, and it can be a catalyst that causes risky behavior and crime. So financially, the whole family will be affected as the problem progresses. Things can get really tight with money, and it can cause the loss of houses or a lot of personal items. Emotionally, the person will eventually become feeling isolated, which could lead to depression, anxiety, and continued and also substance use. So not only will the person feel isolated, but the family may feel isolated. They might feel embarrassed and shamed about the person's behavior. This will cause just isolation on both ends, and this could also lead to the person who is gambling to have thoughts of suicide. So it's definitely affects the emotional and physical health. Physically, too, people may stop taking care of themselves, and they also may ignore health issues that are arising. People who are falling into problem gambling might also resort to crimes such as forgery or fraud or theft or embezzlement in order to pay for their gambling habits. So there are many risk factors that can be associated with gambling disorder. Risk factors could include problem relationships, social isolation, chronic or overwhelming stress, life transitions, recent crises or setbacks. Also, people with co-occurring mental health issues are more likely to have issues with problem gambling. That's really important to note.